July 12th, 1934, I, Henry Slucki, was born. As my mother held me in her arms in our little hospital bed in Paris, France, the people outside were gearing up to celebrate. They were celebrating me, of course. It was my birthday after all. Well, that's what I thought. It wasn't until I grew older and I realized they were celebrating French Independence Day, or Bastille Day, not my birthday. I lived in Paris until I was about 6 years old. At one point, I lived with my mother and father. At one point, however, my father enlisted in the French army. You see, in 1938, the Jewish French premier, or France's Jewish premier, Leon Blum, had created a voluntary military service for foreigners. And in exchange, these foreigners would gain citizenship. And so my father joined the military, and it was a 6-month service. In my father's absence, my mother and I watched as Paris, the home I loved and longed for beyond the war, became more and more threatened by war. From painted and taped windows to constant air raid drills and the eventual posting of swastikas, we knew our home in Paris was coming to its end. But my father got out of the military and we moved to Montauban, southern France. It was a much safer place for us as Jews, and we lived there for 2 whole years in peace. Bang, bang, bang! It's the French police! Open up! Bang, bang, bang! My parents jumped out of bed, knowing why the French police were at our door, knowing that they were here to take us away, and knowing that our home in Montauban was also at its end. They run into my room. Bang, bang, bang! It's the French police! The men didn't wake me up. Not even the shaking of the house from them ramming their bodies into the door woke me up. It wasn't until my mother sat on my bedside and shaked me awake and said, Riri, wake up. Be very still and be very quiet. And so I woke up, very confused. I hear the men screaming, and my parents won't tell me why I have to be quiet. I don't understand. And I want to ask them why, but I can't. And I want to go back to sleep, but I can't because the men are so loud. I begin growing annoyed. But then my mother offers to play a game, a pretend nobody's home game. And so we play this game, and she tells me how well of a job I'm doing, and I'm such a good boy. And we play this game for nearly an hour and a half until it grows quiet. And we're not entirely sure if these men have left. So we very quietly get dressed, and we sit in silence until a very kinder, more polite knock rings through. This kinder knock was my uncle, Avram. He had stopped by to ensure that we were safe, as French police had come knocking on his door as well, although they left after only a minute and a half. He didn't stay for very long. He gave us a kiss goodbye. Before that, however, I watched as they all spoke in Yiddish to each other, my mother, father, and uncle. I didn't understand what they were saying, but they were speaking over each other, and it was exciting. But as he left, my father looked at me and he told me to run over to our friend's house, the Tarlets, and to go and grab him and tell him that there was a plan we had to put in enact. And so I did. I run down the street around the block to Tarlet's home, and I tell him exactly what my father said. And he grabs his beret and his coat, and we head back to my home where my parents are waiting at the door. They all sit at the dining table, and this time I can understand them. They're speaking French, not Yiddish. And they say that we're going to a farm. I don't know what this farm is, but it sounds exciting. And as my father puts a small backpack on me and a medium-sized backpack on my mother, and he takes a bigger backpack, it reminds me of the 3 Little Bears, and we get into Tarlet's truck. On November 11th, 1942, Germans took over the rest of France, including southern France. France wasn't safe for us anymore. At this point, we were still at the farm. We took about 2 weeks to sell our things and hire some Spanish refugees to guide us across the Pyrenees to get out of France. By November 26th, we were ready to leave. We had taken a train to La Maison from Montauban, and from there we sat in the train station waiting all morning. As I sat on the bench with both my parents on either side of me and my feet dangling from the bench, I waited. We waited for 2 hours. It was a boring wait, but we were patient. After 2 hours, a man walked in. I had recognized this man. He was the supervisor guide. I remember going with my father to set up this meeting and hire the guides. So I knew who he was. He walked in to this train station just by coincidence and he saw us and he said, "Oh, you guys are still here." And we're like, "Of course, we've been waiting. We've been waiting for our guides for 2 hours." That's when he informs us that the guides were just outside, 10 feet away, but on the complete opposite side of the train station, this complete opposite side of the wall. And we had missed them, but they had been captured, taken away. Well, he set up new guides for us, and we waited until that evening when we met with the new guides and we headed across the Pyrenees. There were 3 guides, one for each of us. The journey was exciting, it was adventurous, it was beautiful weather, and oftentimes, if I was sleepy, I would sleep on the guide's shoulders. So it was enjoyable. It took 5 days and 5 nights. After arriving in Barcelona, after the journey across the Pyrenees, we lived there for a bit. I joined a French school and I learned Spanish and really enjoyed our lives there. But we were still in Europe, and the threat of there's rumors of evacuation to North Africa. So we knew we had to leave. And an opportunity arose, an opportunity to go to America. But this opportunity was only for children. And so I had to leave my parents in Europe. That was when, on September 20th, I went on a convoy to America with 9 other children, European children. We left Barcelona via train. From this train station, we headed to Portugal. In Portugal, we boarded another ship and headed on a 2-week venture by sea on a Portuguese ship. This venture was interesting. All you could see was blue sea all around you, but eventually we saw the shore and we arrived in Philadelphia. Upon our arrival in Philadelphia, we were taken to New Jersey and we were sorted into a shelter home. The first morning in the shelter home, we were sorted into for breakfast. We were sitting in a big dining room and we sat there with a bowl, a spoon, and a pitcher of milk and a cardboard box sitting in front of us. And we weren't quite sure what to do with this assortment of items. We'd never seen it before. It wasn't until we watched the other children put the milk into the bowl and then follow with the whatever was in the cardboard box, this mysterious, dry, dehydrated food. And so we followed suit. And that was my first time having cereal and my first taste of America. We didn't stay in this shelter home for very long. We were sorted into foster homes, although I was the only one out of the 10 children that got to live with relatives. I went to live with my great uncle and aunt in Washington Heights. While I was living with them, I attended public school, of course, but along with that, I attended a Yiddish school. It operated in the evening. I absolutely loved this Yiddish school. It taught me my Jewish identity and culture, and of course, it taught me Yiddish. But beyond that, although I didn't know at the time, it taught me ideals and politics and my beliefs growing into as I would advocate for as I grew older. Along with the Yiddish school, my parents, who met at an anti-fascist revolutionary group as just mere teenagers, their influence also impacted my advocacy later in life. My parents were able to join me in America in 48, and then 3 years later, in 1949, we moved to Los Angeles. Call me a 49er. I attended UCLA for both my undergraduate and my PhD program. I had a year at Columbia for my master's, and I worked at USC for 53 years as a professor of psychology. And then I met my beautiful wife, Carol, and I had some beautiful children and grandchildren. As a survivor, I'm not a hero. The heroes were those who helped us, the rescuers. those who risked their lives when they could have sat idly by. We depend on each other for survival, us as humans, and we depend on those who help us to help as well. And so, I, as a survivor, and everyone here as witnesses, it is our responsibility to ensure never again to anyone, anywhere.
I'm overwhelmed. We met, about 2-3 months ago? And Avery, you've been able to incorporate my story completely, leaving nothing out. It's amazing. Thank you very much for telling one of many, many stories that we survivors each have as individuals, but the lessons are the same. As you say at the end, we should never let this happen again to anyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Henry, here I have for you. Yep. Okay. This goes for you. I promise to keep your story and tell it for years to come.
Thank you very much.